How's it going, everyone? Yosef back here with another video, and I hope you're having an amazing week so far. Today, you join me in a parking lot on a very beautiful but windy day to talk about an important question that I've been asked a few times. Yosef, what do I do if I have $100,000 to spend on a car and I want something that's really performance oriented, that's a good driver's car, that's got a story behind it, that's designed with passion and care and is not just a BMW or an Audi or Mercedes? Well, for those of you that are asking that question, I have the perfect car for you. And today, we're gonna get a chance to take a look at it. And that is the 2022 Alfa Romeo Stelvio Quadrofoglio. Now, some of you may know about this car, a lot of people don't. So I wanted to spend some time today talking about this really amazing brand and cool car, tell you about the story of where it came from, why it's here, what are some of the cool features about it, some of the things that I can't stand about it, and then we're gonna go for a little drive and experience the awesome 505 horsepower that this car delivers. So, are you ready? Let's go. Now let's talk about the Alfa Romeo Stelvio Quadrofoglio for a minute because, well, as you can see, this is a family car, but it's a family car with a 2.9 liter twin turbocharged V6 that is very Ferrari derived, even though they don't put it on the brochure, and has 505 horsepower, which is amazing when you think about the competition that it stacks up against: the BMW X3, the Audi SQ5, the Mercedes GLC 63 AMG, and some of the others out there. This is a really impressive looking car, and it drives really well, which we'll find out a little bit more later on. But the cool thing about it is it just looks like nothing else on the road. You've got such a mean front end, and the side profile is very voluptuous and curvy, and the same goes for the back of it. It just looks so distinct. There's really nothing else on the road that looks quite like this, and I think that's one of the cool things about it. When you drive it around, nobody really knows what it is unless you're a car person, and you stand out from everybody else who's just gone the boring route and chose an Audi or BMW or Mercedes. You have specifically gone out of your way to find something cool and unique, and you picked out an Alfa Romeo. And this car has so much history, and it's got so many cool things about it, which we'll take a look at momentarily. But if I were spending $100,000 in an SUV for my family, but wanted something really performance oriented and wanted something fun to hoon around on the weekends too, this is it. There is nothing else on the market that really sort of gives you that full package quite like the Stelvio Quadrofoglio. All right, let's talk about the styling for a minute. Now, I think the styling is a little controversial. I love this car. I think it looks absolutely beautiful. I love the color. I love the black wheels. I love all the little details about it, but not everybody shares the same view as I do. But I think one of the greatest things about the look of this car is it's got such an aggressive front end. I mean, take a look at that triangular grille, all the gills over there in the front. You look at the intakes and the lights, and it just looks like a mean and angry face. And then you take a look at all of those slashes in the hoods, you know, that lets the engine breathe, and it's just such a cool look in my opinion, and it really stands out from some of the other SUVs on the market that just look, you know, a little boring and sort of normal. This one definitely doesn't, and that's one of the things that I find truly exceptional about this car. I love what Alfa Romeo has done also for the wheels. There's such a unique and interesting looking rim that you won't see on any other car, and I find that to be so cool. You know, these days everyone's looking for aftermarket rims. I think this is one of those cars you buy it from the factory and you can absolutely enjoy the fact that you've got something unique that nobody has. And take a look at those painted brake calipers. You've got the Alfa Romeo script over there. It's nicely painted in red. They're absolutely enormous. And I love the drilled rotors. They're just so cool. And obviously you need a little bit of cooling in there with those massive brakes to slow down this very impressively powered car. Alfa Romeo had a great racing team and they were very successful for the most part, but there was a period of time where they weren't doing so well, and they decided that they would put these 4-leaf clovers on the car so that they would have that better luck. And unfortunately, there was one day that one of the racing drivers was driving without the 4-leaf clover on the car, and on that very unfortunate day, he had an accident and he died. And so for that reason, Alfa Romeo put these 4-leaf clovers on all of their performance cars, and there's a triangle to symbolize, well, there were 4 drivers back in the day. One of them passed away, and so they used to have that as a diamond, and they cut that down to being just a triangle to commemorate the loss of that driver. And to me, that is a really interesting and special story. And that's how you can tell the difference outside of the cosmetic and performance details that you have here that separate this from a regular Stelvio. Now, making our way to the back of the Stelvio Quadrofoglio, you take a look at the bottom and you find you've got this really nice diffuser and quad exhausts. That's not something you see on every car, and guess what, guys? They are absolutely real. And that's something that is really special, and I wanted to take a minute just so that you can hear what that beautiful exhaust sounds like. All right, let's take a look at the interior now, because it's a very special place to be. Now, when you take a look at the door cards, they look really nice at first glance, and you've got this beautiful carbon fiber up here that sort of sweeps all alongside to the door handle. You've got physical buttons for everything, and you've got an upgraded sound system that comes with the Quadrofoglio. It's a Harman Kardon system, and this one puts out about 900 watts, which is really powerful. So for those people who like good sound, not only do you have that sound coming out of the exhaust, but you've got a really nice sound system to go along with it. And when you take a look at the interior here, you've got some nice stitching, you've got soft touch materials all around, even on the top. The quality of the materials is not super exciting. I mean, you take a look at some of the dials and buttons here and they do feel a little bit cheaper. And you have to remember, this is at the end of the day a Stellantis product. So it's basically in partnership with Dodge and Jeep and sort of all of those American brands. So there is a bit of parts bin shopping in here, but it does still look really nice. I mean, take a look at the pedals. You've got those aluminum pedals, even for the dead pedal, which a lot of cars don't have. That's a really small touch that I think is really awesome. And even when you take a look at the door sill here, you've got that 4-leaf clover as well, just to remind you you're in something special. It's not illuminated, but it looks really cool when you're greeted with it coming into the car. Now, one of the things that I absolutely love about the interior of this car are the seats. Now, these are the standard seats, but you can also get some performance Alcantara lined carbon fiber backed seats. Now, these ones are going to be the more comfortable ones, less track focused, but man, if you look at the embossed Alfa Romeo logo over there, that to me is just so cool. And going down the back of the seats, you've got the perforations, really nice thick bolsters here that hug you in place. And you've got that leg extender that a lot of cars don't have, and that's something that I absolutely love. Moving into the center console area, you also have that beautiful carbon fiber over here, which looks just stunning. You've got a really nice sort of closed center console area here, so if you wanted to hide your cup holders and make everything look clean, you can do that. But you can also open it, and you've got some great cup holders there. Now, one of the things that you'll notice right away, if you're familiar with BMWs, is you basically have the BMW iDrive system over here. You've got the same shifter to put you in gear. You've got a really nice sort of rotary dial over here, very much similar like you would get in a BMW. And there are a few more of those BMW touches as we go along that I'll mention, but I really like that you've got the physical buttons here. You don't always get physical buttons in cars nowadays, but the fact that even though this is a 2022 and still has that is a really cool touch. The air vents are integrated really nicely. There's nothing too special about them, but I really love these circular ones on the sides. I think they're just so cool and interesting to take a look at and to play around with. Now, the party piece for this car, in my opinion, really is the steering wheel. And if you take a look at it, first of all, looks very busy. There's a lot going on here. You've got a very thick and soft lined Alcantara sort of part over here, but the steering wheel itself is a perfect diameter. It's not too thick, it's not too thin. You've got the physical dials over here and buttons for volume and answering your calls, which I think is really cool. I love the Alfa Romeo logo in the middle. And the biggest thing that you'll notice is you've got the stop start button over here on the steering wheel, which is such a cool touch. A lot of cars have it somewhere else, but on this car, it's bright red and on the steering wheel, which kind of makes you feel like you're in a performance or race car type experience. I love that they've got the carbon fiber over here, and you've got another 4-leaf clover on the steering wheel, and it's flat bottomed, which just adds a little bit more to the drama. And if we take a look just behind the steering wheel, you've got these massive paddle shifters. And no, they're not plastic, they are actually metal, which feel amazing. And when you press them, there's just such a nice click and actuation to them. It's such a great feeling. That's one of the great things that makes this car feel a little more driver's focused. No, you don't have the biggest screen in the world. No, it's not the highest resolution. No, you don't have a full digital gauge cluster, but this car really feels special with some of those unique touches. Now, taking a look at the gauge cluster over here, you'll notice you've got, again, another 4-leaf clover in the speedometer, which is another little quick reminder that you're in something special and unique. You don't get that in a regular Stelvio. That's something that's unique to the Stelvio Quadrofoglio. Now, I love the way that the car looks, and it feels really special getting into here, but there's a few things that are kind of the weak points, in my opinion, of it. We talked about the cool things with the paddle shifters, of course, and the beautiful steering wheel and the start button here, but the gauge cluster really leaves a lot to be desired. I mean, it's very old looking in terms of the gauges themselves, and then you've got a little small screen in the middle over there. For a 2022, for a $100,000 car, you would wish to have something a little bit more modern in there, but I do understand that this is not considered a luxury car. This is designed to be a performance car. Some of those things are going to be lacking. But if we take a look at the infotainment system, well, first of all, the graphics are probably 10 years old. It's a bit of an old feeling infotainment system, and even though it is customizable and it's a touchscreen, everything's a little laggy, and you can play around with things in here, but it's not as intuitive as you would like it to be. And a lot of it is controlled with the rotary dial over here. You can turn it around and play around with it, but again, it's not as easy to get along with as probably some of the other cars that you might be used to in terms of the luxury car market. And the one thing that I find also a little bit frustrating is, even though the screen is not so big and not super high resolution, I would have expected the reverse camera to be a little bit better. It's a tiny screen, you don't get a top-down view, there's no other sort of views for it, it's just whatever's directly behind you. And again, for 2022, for a modern car, I wish that was a little bit better. But other than that, those are some of the downsides with the car. Everything else seems to be really cool and exciting, and it really does scream to you that, you know, you're in something special and performance oriented. And that, to me, you know, I'm willing to make some of those compromises. Now, there's a little mode over here. You'll see it says race and D and A. Now, this dial puts you into the sport mode or the normal mode or comfort. And you can also, if you switch yourself back into the dynamic mode, which is the performance mode, you get the option to firm up or loosen up the suspension. And that'll also open up the valves on the exhaust. So we heard the really crazy cool sound from the exhaust. That's how we get that. Otherwise, the valves are closed, and it's a pretty quiet and relaxing place to be. Now, you'll notice one other small touch over here. You've got the Italian flag sort of put into this shifter area. And that, to me, is a really cool small touch that you don't get in a lot of cars nowadays. They're proud to be Italian, and it's really nice to see that. And again, I love the physical dials over here where you can switch tracks or change the volume. You don't have to go into any menus to make all of that happen. Everything is super easy and simple to play around with here. One last thing to mention about this car's BMW-ness and thing that I don't like, and that is the turn signal. If we put the turn signal on, you'll notice it goes back to the middle. It's that same BMW system that we saw in the Rivian. We've seen in some other cars that I really can't stand. I wish that it just sort of turned on normally like a regular turn signal, held its place, and then, you know, canceled when you turned. But unfortunately, we got to deal with that over here. That is one downside. Again, not a deal breaker, but it's something to be aware of. And it's a little bit of a stretch when you go back here because of the paddle shifters. That is prioritized, which obviously is very cool. But if you want to go and reach the turn signal, you got to make sure that you're reaching a little further back and not accidentally hitting your paddle shifter. Now, a lot of times people think, well, if it's a performance car, I've got to sort of give up a few things. It's got to be compromised in some way. But this car really isn't. I mean, if you take a look at it, you've got, again, cup holders. You've got a little spot there for the key. You've got a wireless charger here. And when we open up the glove box, you've got a lot of space in there. You've got USB Type-C and USB Type-A ports in there. You've got great space in the door bins as well. Some cup holders in there. You've got a nice glove box as well that's very nicely damped and felt lined. So it's not a super compromised car. Moving on to the back seat area of the Stelvio Quadrofoglio, when you open up the back door, you've got the same quality materials back here. It's also soft touch up here. You've got the same carbon fiber. You don't get the same special grille that you get on the speaker as you did in the front, but that's okay. We'll forgive them for that. You have a lot of really nice contrast stitching here as well. And when you take a look at the seats in the back, they're the same leather that you would have had in the front, which is a really nice thing. The only thing that we're missing back here is the Alfa Romeo logo in the headrest. But other than that, it's a very nice place to be in the back seat of this car. And if you take a look, you also have the air vents back here, those really cool round shaped ones. Kind of reminds me of the sort of engines of a fighter jet or something like that. It looks really cool. And if we take a little look lower down, you also have heated seats in the back, which you don't always get on every car, especially not every performance car. And you've got charge ports in the back for the kids as well. Now, if we take a look back here, you also have a center armrest that folds down, which is really nice. You do have the cup holders here, which is convenient, but it shares the space with the armrest, which is not like the GLC 300 that we reviewed last week. And I'll put a link for that into the description below. So take a look at what they've done in terms of the cool features there. But otherwise, it's a nice back seat. There is quite a bit of space back here. It's not as big as some of the competitors. You are compromised a little bit in terms of space, but that is obviously something that you're going to give up with the beautiful look of the car. And if we take a look above us, you've got a beautiful panoramic sunroof that goes all the way back. And that to me is really nice. If you don't have all the space in the world in the back, it is nice to have that airy feel. And even though this is sort of a coupe-like design, it makes it feel very spacious back here. Now, taking a look at the trunk of the Stelvio Quadrofoglio, we open up the beautiful tailgate and you're greeted with actually quite a lot of space. It's surprisingly big back here, and because you've got sort of a higher back and it's not as curved in terms of the styling, you have a decent amount of space back here. You've got a great big subwoofer, which is really nice. You've got a little bit of space under the floor here. Not a ton of room, but if you wanted to store some small stuff, you can. You've got some really nice tie downs, which are metal. And you've got a few small little things that help make this car feel a little bit easier and more exciting to use. You can fold the seats down from here. You just pull that forward and the seats are released and they can just flop forward, which is really nice. And you can fold down the middle seats separately, which allows you to have a little bit more practicality in the back here. If you wanted to have car seats or kids on both ends and just fold down that middle row, so you've got an ability to put skis or something larger in there. That is really nice. And one of the great things about this car too is you've got this cargo cover that retracts back into its own space. You don't have this really cheap feeling plastic thing that covers up the trunk. If you wanted to cover it, you just pull this out. If you don't, you just pull it out and it slides back away. So you don't have to worry about anything big to kind of hide around if you don't want to keep it in there. One last thing to mention about the trunk, which is really nice, is you've got two buttons back here, which I love to see. You can close the trunk with that button, but if you press that one, it'll lock and close the trunk. And that way you can walk away with your keys and you don't have to worry about wondering if the car was left open. I wish every car had that. It's really nice that this one does too. All right, let's go for our drive. Now, right off the bat, I wanted to mention that this car is actually very comfortable. For a lot of performance cars, you feel like you're compromising a little bit in terms of the quality of the seats and the comfort, but in this car, you really aren't. The seats are incredibly supportive. They're really nice. They don't squeeze you too much, so you don't feel like you're giving up, all of that comfort in it, but they are very nice, and I could imagine going on a long road trip in this car and being very comfortable. Now, I'm going to drive it in the most sporty mode because I think that's really what we all want to see. So I'm going to put on the sport suspension. It's in the dynamic mode, so we can get a feel for what that's like and hear the sounds that the exhaust makes as we go for our drive. But one thing that I have to say is it's a very easy car to get along with, and for a lot of performance cars, that's not always the case. The brake pedal is easy to modulate, the throttle response is really great, but it doesn't, hit you in the face the second you touch the throttle pedal. The driving position is really great. I mentioned that I love the way the steering wheel is set up. It feels very comfortable in the hands with obviously the Alcantara here and just the way that it's set up. And I overall really like the look of this car. I find it to be very cool and exciting looking. And you have sort of the haunches of the front end that you can see over of the hood, which just look really cool when you're driving it around. And I think even in the most dynamic mode with the suspension, it doesn't feel like it's so stiff that, you can't really enjoy the drive. They've done a really nice job with the tuning so that it feels very sporty, but not so much so that you can't enjoy it every day, sort of for the normal commute. Now, I will say one of the sort of challenges with the way that this car is designed is you've got very big sort of pillars in the front and around the doors. So, the A pillars, the B pillars, they're all very thick, and that does hamper visibility a little bit. So that's something that you have to be aware of getting into this car and driving it and owning it. But once you get over it, it's not so bad. The windows are still pretty big. You get a really nice view, obviously with this panoramic sunroof above you. It just feels so spacious and airy in here, even though the interior is very dark. And just listening to the sound of the exhaust as you're going around, it really is an exciting sound. It sounds great. It's not too in your face. I'm sure if you were driving on the highway, it might be a little bit louder, but just doing the normal sort of city driving, it feels and sounds really awesome. And I love a good sounding exhaust. I think it's really cool to have that experience. It's not just the suspension feel, it's not just the steering being so direct, it's also the sound that you get from the car, and all those things put together just make the driving experience so unique and special. And I just noticed you've got the auto stop start system, even though we're in the dynamic mode. So it's there to help save you a little bit of gas, even though you've got a twin turbo V6 under the hood that spits out 505 horsepower. Now, driving around, there is a little bit of wind noise coming through, as is expected. Obviously, you got a lot of that engine sound coming from the exhaust, which I really love. But otherwise, it is a pretty quiet place to be. Even though this is sort of like a Jeep, Dodge kind of quality car, built from those brands, it is a very sort of luxurious feel to it. It doesn't feel like everything's rattling and cheap and not great. It is put together relatively well for one of those types of cars. So I am pleasantly surprised about that. I'm going to try and take it on a bit of a side street and see if we can open up just a little bit so we can enjoy more of that exhaust note. Yeah, it's a quick car and it feels really great. The power delivery is really nice. I love hitting these paddles. They're just so special to use, and it's amazing on the downshifts also. It sounds really great, and just feeling these metal paddles and playing around with them are just so cool. It's like nothing else. And they're in the right place too, because a lot of cars, they have the paddle shifters connected to the steering wheel. In this case, they're just connected to the steering column, which in my opinion really is the right place to do it, because if you turn the steering wheel, you know where your paddles are. If it's any other car, and it's just on the steering wheel, every time you turn the steering wheel, you got to go find your paddle again. And they're huge, so even if you are turning and driving a little more aggressively and going around corners, you still have the ability to very easily hit those paddle shifters and make sure you're in the right gear. And just listen to those downshifts. It sounds so aggressive. I absolutely love it. It shifts reasonably quickly. It's not, I wouldn't say super fast, but you know, for being an SUV, sports tuned SUV, overall the driving experience is really, really great. You know, driving around the city and having an exciting car to experience and just play around with every day, and also be able to go do sort of the normal stuff, go do grocery shopping and take kids to school. You know, it's really impressive what they've been able to achieve here. And again, I think one of the great things about this car is it's just so unique and special. We talked a little bit about it before, but you know, there are so many cars out there right now in this space, but there aren't a lot of unique cars. Everybody and their mother has a BMW X3M or Mercedes GLC, you know, 63 AMG or 45 AMG, and no one has an Alfa Romeo Giulia or Stelvio Quadrofoglio. You know, you drive around in this car and you are unique. You're driving around something special, and people who know about it, you know, will be excited to see it. I was excited when I saw this car for the first time, and you know, driving it around, I'm sure anybody out there who sees this bright blue Stelvio Quadrofoglio will get excited, who, you know, cares about cars. And you know, that's what it's all about. You want to be able to get into the car, enjoy it, and feel special doing it. It's not just any other car that people are driving. And you know, for that alone, I feel like it's worth getting this car and not the competition. But if you're somebody who wants sort of going with the grain and doing what everybody else is doing, you know, that's what every other car is out there for. This is for the person who really wants to be unique, who wants something special and different and exciting, and wants to be able to get in and, you know, play with the paddles and enjoy the experience of the power and the way that it sort of delivers it to you. And that, in my opinion, is really what the Alfa Romeo brand is all about. It's not about all the technology. It's not about all the luxurious features that you would get in some cars. This car is one of those that you just get in and you enjoy the drive. You enjoy getting in and feeling the way this car feels. And so yes, they've gotten away with some of the cheap feeling things and some of the annoying BMW things, but you know, put that aside and you get in and you drive on a beautiful day and you play with those paddles and you feel the 500 horsepower beneath your right foot. Yeah, that's what it's all about. There was one last thing that I forgot to mention before, and that is there is no heads-up display. Again, that is one of the unfortunate things that didn't carry forward in this car. It would be nice to get a heads-up display. I always like having those, but again, it's not a deal breaker on a car like this. And the gauge cluster is clear enough, and it's pretty high up where you can see your speed very easily wherever you are. But it would be nice to have a heads-up display. I think that's some of the technology that should be standard on most cars nowadays. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I definitely enjoyed making it, and I'll see you again in the next video.